Gordon Smith is the Emmy-nominated writer of Better Call Saul. Just finished its 5th season. I'm at Ella Gold Derby, here to ask you, Gordon. This year, you tried your hand at directing. What was that experience like?
That was crazy. I don't know what possessed me to ask to do it, but it's I've been on set a lot with the directors. I'm usually lurking behind any of the directors that I work with, just sort of talking over what we think about the scene and trying to be helpful. But being in that chair was a lot more than I expected. I described it to Jim McKay, who was prepping the next episode, and I had done an episode with him the previous season, as like being slowly squeezed like a tube of toothpaste until you're just empty, and then the next day it's the same thing, just squeezed until you're done. So
yeah, okay, yeah, no, that's great. And also, what was the biggest challenge with directing?
The biggest challenge I feel like was making sure not getting in the way, really. It's because the cast, they know what they're doing so well. So much of it is just being able to give them as little as possible to nudge them in the direction that I was hoping to get. You're kind of acting like a mirror to just say, all right, look, I know what you're trying to do. I understand, you get the scene, but I'm looking for some small change in that. And just the great thing about all of our casts is you could give them those very small adjustments, and they'll get it, and they'll take it across an entire scene. And so, you can just nudge them and then let them run. And it's a lot of fun, because it's the thing that you kind of want to do, is play and be able to just, be there collaborating and building something. But it is a challenge, because you have all of these thoughts running through your head, and you're like, okay, I really need this, and you want to explain it all, but condensing it down and being short with everybody, but not too short. You need to be able to communicate, but not spend too much time blathering. This answer would have been bad on set, is what I'm saying. This too much blather, but that's the challenge, is to like take all of that and just be like, be short.
And you directed the episode Namaste. Was there a particular scene which you think worked particularly well in that episode?
Let's see. I think I was actually pretty proud of the courtroom scene with Jimmy and Kim, both because it was, there were a lot of, it was a challenging scene to get together. There's a lot of points of view that you need to cover, because you need to kind of understand so many different people's perspectives, especially Kim's perspective on it, because it's kind of a scene about him seeing face to face what Saul Goodman looks like in the courtroom, not Jimmy, but Saul Goodman, and so you had to make sure that she was alive, and kind of you understood in the concept in the scene where her head was at, but also you had to understand where Jimmy's head was at in terms of what he was doing in the court. So that was tough to get together, but I feel like as much through what all the actors did and what our great crew did, our editors helped me tremendously, just be able to figure out, okay, we want to be here, we want to be with these people, and now we want to be over here, and when can we how do we make those transitions between points of view so that nobody's confused about what's going on?
Yeah, and you wrote the episode Namaste as well, and you wrote another episode this season, Bagman. Both of those episodes are quite different. One, the Namaste, you're juggling a lot of balls in terms of storylines and characters. The other is sort of very, in some ways, almost self-contained. I know that obviously it's within the context, but you just are pretty much telling a story of Jimmy and Mike out in the desert. What's it like? Like, But you have writing credits for two so different episodes. Are they different? Were they different gears putting together?
Yeah, I mean they're a little bit different gears. The process is entirely the same. You know, we go into the room and we figure out what needs to be happening in the next piece of the story. And it just so happened when we got to episode 8, that piece of the story kind of drove out all the other pieces of the story. And it's not, I don't think necessarily for bad, because at the same time, as it is one story, it's our two main leads, Mike and Jimmy, have a lot to do. And some of our strong supporting characters, Lalo and Kim, also have big parts to play in the course of the episode. So, so in some ways it was actually nice, because it felt like all the pieces that are kind of running in parallel and running sort of opposite each other in episode 4 and in other parts of the season kind of collide and don't bounce off each other. They collide and stick together through the course of episode 8, which, you know, it is fun. There's a challenge, I feel like, in terms of making sure that, you know, you're not boring people, or that you're not just dragging things out because you're stuck with such a limited palette in terms of episode 8. But there's a fun in being like restricted. It's you know, it's the challenge of a sonnet in poetry or something like that, where you have to stay within the narrow confines of the story that you're telling. So what can you do, and what's out there? And, you know, and as we were breaking it, that's what we had to do. We sort of thought, well, what would they have with them? Okay, well, what are they going to run into? What are the problems that they run into? What are the challenges of doing this in real life? And what of that can we bring in to the story to make it, you know, more interesting? What can we do to make it feel like a story that you want to stick with for its contained, you know, self-contained piece?
Was there a moment in Bagman that in the writer's room ended up looking sort of like, that ended up surprising you in the final product of how that episode turned out?
I mean, mostly in terms of surprise, I was obviously delighted by most of it, by all of it, really. But I think the part that was craziest to see on screen, that was way more dramatic in the best possible way, was the rolling over of the car at the end, which our stuntman told us that we were within a couple of rotations of the record for that, of number of times that the car went end over end, which is a record that you're like, wow, that's amazing, and also, my God, that's terrifying. Being on set for that was terrifying, because you know, the entire crew we prepped and we tried to be very safe, but then everyone was holding their breath, just, you know, because so much can go wrong. And when Corey, our stuntman, climbed up out of there at the very end, you know, everyone just breathed this huge sigh of relief and applauded, and it was pretty amazing.
With Better Call Saul, what has surprised you most about where these characters have gone? As you know, as someone in the writers' room who's helped steer that direction.
Yeah. I think what's been fascinating, I think all of the characters have gone on different journeys. Obviously, you know, Kim Wexler has been a huge surprise, because I think we knew the least about her when we started. We knew that she would be important, and we knew that that the character was interesting. We knew the actress was interesting. But as we've been able to sort of try more things and say, well, what would Kim do in this situation? We've been delighted to discover all of the things and all of the places where she surprises us, and all the places where we can't anticipate where she's going. So that journey has been really, you know, fun to watch, and fun to work on with Ray, who is so incredible, and so detailed with her work. So I think we know in some ways, I feel like we know the journeys about for Jimmy and Mike, but at the same time, there have been nuances in those journeys too that have been surprising. I don't think any of us really understood the important role that Jimmy's brother was going to play in his evolution when we started. So that's that the idea that this story, or the genesis of somebody as kind of facile and sleazy as Saul Goodman could come from a trauma and a mourning and a grief process was not something I think we knew or would have anticipated when we started. And now, as it's sort of that toxic melancholy is kind of really getting him into Saul Goodman mode. I think it's been sad, but also fascinating to watch.
There's always like a biblical component to it with the tale of two brothers.
Yes, absolutely.
And with the sixth season being announced being the final season, you have sort of the death of Chuck falls at the sort of very midpoint of the story, which is sort of very, I don't know, poetic or symbolic or something. Yeah. Final season, season 6 has been announced. A bit of a longer season, so that's nice. A bit of extra time to sort of land the plane. How are you going about putting together that final season without giving any spoilers as to what's going to happen?
Well, we are like many writers' rooms right now. We are working on Zoom, so we are all at home, looking at our computers, much like this, for several hours, many hours a day. We have some workarounds, but by and large, the process is exactly as it has been. We're asking ourselves, based on where these characters have been, where are they going? What are the logical next steps? What are the things that make emotional sense? What are the things? I think the thing that is probably slightly different from years past is we have to kind of ask the question a lot: what's the most satisfying end point for any given character? Where do we leave them? What if we leave somebody in a state of unrest? That can be interesting. And if we leave somebody, settled, then that can be interesting too. But we just have to ask, like, okay, what do we really? What does this character deserve? What is this character? What's the best send off for this character or that character? And that's a conversation that's tricky, because you want to follow both the logic of everything that's come before, but also say, all right, well, but we're wrapping up now, so we have to kind of figure out how to. We keep talking about it like as driving the golden spike between figuring out how the various there's three timelines really of the show. There's the big long present tense 2003 2004 prequel. There's hints of what happens during the Breaking Bad years, and then there's post Breaking Bad years in Omaha. And so we have to kind of figure out how to connect all of those pieces and make sure that they're that they all have some kind of satisfying conclusion in a weird way. So it's very challenging to juggle all of those thought processes at once, but we're doing our best.
And it's funny, like, and in some sense, the Omaha storyline, which we know the least about and have probably seen the least of the 3 different timelines, is the one where you have the most freedom.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, which also there's a kind of terror to that. In some ways, having the rules of like, well, we can't kill off Mike Ehrmantraut here. He has to live for a while. That's a stricture on the narrative that we have to abide by, and we try to. But the blank page of Omaha, we have ideas about where we want it to go, and I think a lot of those are good ideas that we're going to try our darndest to get to. But not knowing exactly what it looks like because we haven't quite, nailed down all the particulars. It's challenging and a little scary.
Up until the end of season 5 of Better Call Saul, so where we're up to, what do you think the show's been about?
Oh, that's interesting. I think the show is a large scale morality play. I think we with all of our characters, we tend to ask the question of what should you do in a given circumstance, and these are all circumstances where people are making bad decisions and doing bad things. So it's not a question of it's not a question of you've got the option of doing something really good. It's more like you have the option of doing 2 bad things. Which bad thing do you choose that's slightly better? Or so it's a very gray morality, but I think it's it's an interesting morality to chart, especially with Jimmy, but really infecting all of our characters. What is the right thing to do with a situation? What is the right thing to do with a life? What is the right way to live? Which I think, it's an old philosophical question. We are not the first to sort of conceive of it broadly, but that really seems to be the thing that we keep coming back to when we're asking a question of where is this character at morally? Where is this story at morally? And what does that tell us that it should be doing? The sad part is when we have to do something like that and we're like, well, the right thing, we know what the right thing to do would be in a given circumstance, but we know that the character has to do something that is not that thing because they're not at that place. And so you have this effect where I think people often, the thing that our audience at least tells us is that our audience is going, no, don't do that, to screaming at the screen, because you can kind of see what the path is that could lead to doing something better. And then you see all of the reasons that are good reasons and emotionally correct reasons to not do it. But you can kind of see that they're leading down a bad path.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite scene from the show over the 5 years?
Favorite scene from the show? Oh man, there's so many. I mean, the ones obviously I know the best are the ones from episodes that I've written.
Yeah.
I think the scene in Bagman where I think the very end of Bagman is one of my favorites. I thought just the aftermath of that crash was so moving, with Bob's performance, drinking very gross liquid, which if you haven't seen it, I'll leave it to your imagination. But him drinking this thing that is sort of a moment of I want to live, which we were very concerned. It's a hard moment because it could come off as a comedy beat at the end of the episode, just ha ha ha. Mm. But we wanted it to be sort of about determination, and then that rolling into seeing the space blanket and him kind of letting go of that ghost of Chuck in the desert. That was very moving to me, which tied into, I think, partially because it ties into another. I think the end of Chicanery, where Jimmy and Chuck are facing down, and it's kind of Jimmy really destroying his brother. Those 2 moments feel like they play off of each other for me now that we've seen both of them.
Yeah. Chicanery episode, you got an Emmy nomination for writing.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Funny, I spoke with Peter Gould last week, and he said the Bob drinking scene was one of his favorites too. So there you go.
Great job. I mean, I know it sounds like we're just making jokes, but like I really feel like Bob's. We in the moment when we watched that on the day, Bob had this just weariness, but with his and grimness, and it was just mesmerizing to watch. And he did the conditions that we were actually shooting under were also really, really horrible. So he had to bring his A game to just to be able to give us anything, and that he gave us something good was magic.
Well, Gordon, thank you so much for talking to us today about Better Call Saul. All the best of luck for the Emmys that will be coming up later this year, and for the final season in the writers' room. For people watching this video, you can go to goldderby.com to make your own Emmy Award predictions and watch other interviews with awards contenders. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.